I just want to pop in on the slide deck just a couple of historical photos to give you an idea that when we say sound system, it just goes so far beyond just that word, because it's like it's an art form. It's a custom technology. You know, it's creating this whole system from scratch in a custom way to create certain sound. And so it incorporates the DJ, the selector, all the folks involved in building the system, and then this whole community around it. So it's super important. I'm just really happy that we get to bring this to you all live. But these are just some photos of some sound systems that are out in the world. And then, of course, here's this amazing one designed by Tali. Her sound system is called Come As You Are, or CAYA. So this is a photo of that. And I just wanted to introduce Tali a little bit here. Obviously the founder of this sound system, CAYA, an educator, a curator, an engineer, an academic. As I said, one of only 3 female sound systems in the UK, I think probably in the world, but I know you're being modest there, Tali, but I'm just gonna be like, maybe there's one more, I don't know. But anyway, very rare. Recognized by The Guardian in 2019 as a creator of autonomous zones responsible for entertaining, educating, and empowering through the power of music. So everybody give a big warm welcome in the chat, applause, however you want to do it, for Thali Lotus. Thank you, Tali, so much for joining us today, because it's kind of late in all the way from the UK, folks. So evening for Tali, but welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey, greetings. Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for such an amazing introduction and for having me as part of the fireside conversation. Absolute pleasure. Obviously, I'm here in the UK, and yeah, I just want to share my experience, the last 4 years of CAYA, and Come As You Are enterprise, what it started as, where it is today, and you know, my intentions for the future. So yeah, I'm super duper excited.
Yay, I love it. I love that you're here. I know that you come from a household, a sound system household, so you have a lot of history just within your family.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could just give us a little overview of that journey for you, like how you started in this, or any experiences that, like you said, in your household that you wanted to share about your journey.
Okay, so I am one of 5. I'm the middle child, and my father had a sound system. I was born in the 80s, and my dad, my grandparents migrated from the Caribbean and also South America, so Guyana. But with that came the migration of the music. So I grew up very much, you know, in, I suppose, the heart of sound system, in that it was in my home. You know, my dad built a sound system and toured with it, and I was very much part of that whole journey of his, you know, so from him building speakers to equipment, to not being able to touch equipment, to, you know, seeing him come in hours later, having played out, you know, at some random place, and, you know, the crew, etc., who were like extended family. So for me, it was very, very much part of my, you know, my being, if I can say. Yeah, I feel like sound system is almost innate, and even the details that I can't remember exactly, I just remember the ambience of it. So I might not remember the exact thing, but I know very much that's what that's where it started for me in terms of music and creativity.
Can you talk a little bit more about, because you're touching on it, but just like what you consider to be the sound system? Like what does that whole, you know, for lack of a better word, culture entail? Because I kind of touched on it, but you have just such a history in it. I'd love to hear that from you.
Okay. So when I refer to sound system, and obviously now, I wouldn't say it's been coined, but sound system is not just the speakers. You know, it's very much considered a culture, for me, a way of life and a way of being. So sound system, as I know it and have experienced it, is the speakers and all the equipment, but it's also, and when I speak about the equipment, I'm speaking about the audio, so the speakers, but then also the preamps, which is that, and also, you know, things such as effects machine, amplifiers, microphones, etc. And then obviously a key component for sound system at that time, which was the 80s when I was young, was vinyls. So that was very, very big because, as we know, CDs and so forth weren't around then. So it was very much vinyls was what was played, and that was very much part of how established sound systems became because of them playing vinyls, etc. And then when I speak about the sound system and the crew, that's not just, you know, the person who's DJing. The crew is made up of the person that carries the boxes, the DJ, the preamp builder, and the host. So it's very much always been a culture and never been a one-man band. Obviously now, I suppose Just Shaka has always been a very much one-man band, but still he's the main front person, but I'll get onto that later. But yeah, it's very much a crew of people, as well as equipment and tools which are necessary in order to entertain through the music. So that's what I experienced being very young, you know. So we had lots of people who would frequent our home. There would always be that rush to get the latest music. There would often be, you know, lots of preparation beforehand, before going out to play at an event, to ensure that, you know, there was always the latest music and the best sounding, so the audio quality of the speakers. The amplifiers that I use now are completely different to what they were back then. And again, those were very much custom built, because the culture is not only about the people who are part of the crew, obviously the people that it serves, but also it's about serving the community. So everything that was built, from the speakers to the preamp, those were built by local people, and it was about serving that community. So none of the equipment is mass manufactured, for example. All of the equipment has been custom built to a spec, in particular for a sound system. So all of that would have been, yeah, very much part of my early childhood, and seeing, you know, the cost of that, yeah, and all that goes with it.
I really love that, the part of it, because I actually learned about this in the 80s, because that was kind of my coming of age. But in the 80s, for me, was like, there was a little bit more crossover, I think, than now. And it might have also been just like another surge of especially from Jamaica and reggae. But what I love about it is that you're keeping the economy, keeping the money in the community, and kind of creating that economy. But not just that, but then it also is just such evidence of creating something new. You know, like, because you've kept it in the community, like that sound system is unique to the community. And the way it sounds is unique to that community, which that was super fascinating to me. Can you talk a little bit more about how you particularly got in? Because I know you designed your own sound system, so how you got into that technical part, I think, would be really interesting to our folks.
No, absolutely. So, as I said, I grew up in the Soundsystem household, and very much experienced it as a child and growing up. And then I've always been a creative, so I've always sung or written music, etc., but really never thought much about pursuing, you know, creating my own sound system until about 5 years ago. But it really started, I would say, way before that. It was like a whole journey. So in the sound system world, just to begin, most sound systems, they have like a tag name, and my tag name is the spiritual liberator, in meaning that, you know, what I play is really what you're known for, and what I'm known for is really taking the music past, you know, just entertainment, but more so meditation. And it all goes back to how I started my journey, which was very much based on me really going on a philosophical journey, and really kind of asking myself those questions of who I am, what I am, why am I doing this, you know, what is the purpose of life, etc. Which led me into, you know, Buddhism, which then led me into Rastafarianism. And from there, I thought about how I could potentially enhance people, all people, not just people of a particular background, and not people of a particular kind or type, etc. And that's very much why I named the sound CAYA, because it's come as you are, and because I, before that, struggled with, you know, who I was, what I was, etc. And I wanted to create almost a safe space with the sound. But it stemmed from my journey of kind of getting to know me and know myself. And then I often, or annually, I attend the Notting Hill Carnival, which is in London. And I always attend a particular part, which is like the dub corner, so to speak. And it's a sound system called Channel One, who are globally renowned. And it was then I had an epiphany of having my own sound system. And I was with a friend, and I kind of went home. I had an epiphany when I was there, and then I went home and had a dream, and I told my friend, and I was like, she was like, you can make it happen. And I was like, I can actually. And then it just kind of went from there, but it very much almost came to me in a dream. But I feel like it was very much meant because of the journey that I had been on. And so in 2014, 15, I started research more than what I had grown up with, but really going to find out from elders in the community, the sound system community, what their, you know, what their narratives were, what they felt was important to sound system and the culture, and what they did and why they did it, and why it was that they used particular equipment. So I spent a year doing that and finding out from them what they felt was important, and then really trying to then create my own take on that. So it was about, you know, tradition and innovation, and so very much, I think I said when we've spoken before, that CAYA is almost a hybrid between, you know, the old and new, tradition and innovation, but also, you know, between audio and sound, you know, because of the different worlds that I suppose, you know, things exist in.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so funny because I think the photo that I showed up there was a Channel One.
It was Channel One sound system.
Yeah, sound system. So that's amazing. And that, yeah, anyway, I'm a fan of you and them, so it's all good. So I wanted to focus a little bit on the technical part. Like, what of the components I mean, maybe we should explain what the components are in your system. So maybe we should back up. Like, what are the components in your system, and what makes your particular system unique, or what do you think makes it unique?
Okay, so I wasn't able to fit the whole sound system here in my in my space, but I'll take you through the majority of it, or describe it to you all. So the sound system CAYA is made up of 16 loudspeakers, and it's configured in a 4-way frequency, made up of the bass, low mids, high mids, and top, so to speak. And so these, for example, these are the scoops, which are responsible for the bass, the low end, 30 dB, and, you know, lower frequencies, and then there's another three frequencies which are stacked usually above this, which obviously make up the four-way sound system. What I use on the sound is amplifiers. I use Class C Class C amplifiers, so they're switch mode. So they're not the traditional analog amplifiers, purely because, as I said, the sound is a mix between tradition and innovation, and purely because even though I do have a crew, to move analog amplifiers is a very big task. And the switch mode amplifiers are a lot more convenient to transport around. So I have 3 amplifiers that I use on the sound. And then I suppose all of my equipment I must add, because CAYA isn't just the sound for me, it's almost its own entity, it's a person. So on all of my speakers, not only for the purpose of identification, but also because I feel like all things have life and a presence, all of them have a name. And I've done that, as I said, because I believe that all things have life, but also because when it comes to a speaker potentially blown, I've never blown any of my speakers, thank goodness. But it's easier to identify once you've got everything back, home, once you're testing out the system after and before an event, you know which one, because they're labeled, but also because all of them, I believe, have life. On the back of this one, I think it's got the name of my mum and dad, and then, there's others which have ancestral names, etc. So moving on from that, we have the preamp. So the preamp basically acts very much like a mixer, but as I mentioned before, it's custom built. So this was made especially for CAYA. It's actually called Spirit, because I believe that it's the spirit of the sound. So this was custom built by a preamp builder in London. Spoke to CAYA Soundsystem, so it operates on a 4-way system. It has a line and phono input. It has kill switches. It has effects on it also, and it also has major different gains and frequencies. So this is the amplifier, and I suppose it was something that I wanted to keep. I don't think you can see it as well on the camera, but yeah, if it was closer you could. But it was something that I wanted to keep as part of the tradition of the sound. Because, as I said, it's the mix between the old and the new. The amplifiers are, more recent technology, whereas the amplifier, I felt the way that I wanted to embody sound system culture was to have a preamp. Some sound systems use, mixers which are widely available and mass manufactured, but I decided that I wanted to have one which was custom built. And then thereafter, I also use, I do have a CD player also, but I generally, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time I use turntable, a single turntable style. And, I'd say 20% of the time I use CD. I never use a laptop on the sound, just because, as I said, I'm very particular about what I play and how I play it, just because I want to maintain some parts of the tradition. And then in addition to that, I also have an effects machine, all of which go through the amplifier. So everything, hits the amplifier first and then goes out, the preamp first and then goes out. In addition to that, I also use microphones on the sound too. And yeah, I usually use maybe 2 different effects machines, and yeah, that's it. I think I've remembered everything. Yes.
What types of effects are you using?
So I use a very, very old Henley and another Grundig effects machine. So they're very, very old, like, yeah, very, very like my dad's, and have been kind of repaired over time. So, yes.
Is it mostly delays? Is that what
Yeah.
they are? Okay.
Mostly delays and effects on them, yeah.
And I don't know if I made this up in my mind, but in previous conversations with you, were you developing your own microphones?
Aha, so yes.
I was like, did I dream that or did it happen? I mean, I think I wrote it down, but
You did not dream that, Terry.
yay.
No, I am currently, and that's part of the that is part of the hybrid, the hybrid status of CAYA. It's the kind of old with the new, in that, as I said, everything on the sound or sound system and how it started is custom built. But what I believe is that, I've been able to maintain what it is through, having the preamp custom built, having the boxes custom built, etc. But I also believe that, I'm one of 3 female sound systems. Don't get me wrong, the culture is alive, around the world. However, I feel that in order for it to last another 100 years, there has to be more innovation. And by that, I mean, demonstrating that it doesn't necessarily just have to be, custom built and sold one-to-one. We can actually look at, what this has actually and can do for the world at large. And so, yes, I'm developing a range of audio equipment, microphones and interfaces, etc., which I hope to, be able to bless the world with.
Can you share any more? I'm particularly, for some reason, curious about these microphones. Anything else you can share about that?
To begin with, it's going to be a dynamic cardioid mic, and thereafter it's going to be lapels and also gaming headphones. But the cardioid ones, I don't want to say too much, but yes, they are to be, I suppose, mics with a difference, and mics which speak to the world from my perspective, because I don't think there's any kind of right or wrong type of design. I just think it's different perspectives, and I really want to be able to innovate and enhance from my perspective. So I'm hoping to do that next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you talk about everything from creating this community environment and the safe space, because that's just something that's been coming up a lot. And obviously, Women's Audio Mission, we talk about that a lot. But it's so rare. So by you kind of creating this whole sound system and a new culture that will ripple out, it's a really I'm 100% inspired, like because it'll create something, and down to like creating new microphones. That's going to be a microphone that hasn't existed before and hasn't had that sound out in the world before, because it has been coming out of a very narrow culture, right? It's like all of the PA equipment and audio equipment, it's like it's coming out of a very narrow thing. So
a very, very, as we know, the audio world is made up of, 5% of it is female. So majority of what we use and do is from that male perspective. And I just think that it would be really, really great to have a different perspective, and to be able to empower people and other women. That, for me in particular, coming from the sound system culture, it's from that cultural perspective, but also to empower people to know that it's not just, I know for me and some of the people that I'm around, they feel that being creative and being in the sound world, you have to sing and write, but there's other aspects of it which I think are just as important and just as valuable. And being able to do that as part of the sound and audio world.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think I can't wait till the microphones come out, which is going to lead me to my. I don't know why I'm obsessed with it, but I think you've kind of went there, but not really. So I want you to expand on this a little bit. But it's always interesting for me, and I think others, to hear like what skills do you think are making you so successful, or like what's your superpower or powers? You kind of alluded to it because you have that tag, but what do you think those skills are that have made you create this huge sound system?
Um, I think I am very autonomous, and I think that because of that, I think that's my I have a lot of autonomy. I'm quite, yeah, very much self-governed, and I think that really came to light because of, you know, struggling to find my own, you know, liberation in who I was and what I did. So I think that's, yeah, part of my superpower. I think it's also to do with, you know, I'm not particularly religious. I always say that I'm more spiritual, and it's always because I've always said that because I've always not wanted to feel like I couldn't, you know, reach out to someone, or I'd have to be, you know, separate. I've always wanted to be able to embrace. So I think, yeah, I think it's probably my nature and being quite optimistic, as well as very, um, I don't know the word, but yeah, something which is all inclusive and very much trying to really bring people together. I think I'm very much a humanitarian, you know, and I like the idea of all people coming together. And so being able to, you know, elevate people past the music. So a lot of the music that I play doesn't have lyrics. It's a lot of instruments, you know, dub music. It's a lot of instruments, and it's very much about vibration and people's energy. And when you do that, you're able to then bring all types of people together. And I think because of that, yeah, people enjoy what I do, and people want to experience CAYA, because, you know, part of the sound system, and this is the thing, going back to sound system and tradition, the traditional sound system, born in Jamaica, you know, out of, you know, what was then, you know, circulation of rhythm and blues music. And then after some time, you know, there was more local interest and local sounds became involved. But what was also key to that culture was having the latest music, and sounding the best, and also clashes, you know. But one thing that CAYA doesn't do is clash. I don't ever clash other sounds. That's not what CAYA does. And I was very, very particular about that, because what I said was that the music, the lyrics of the music, a lot of it, in dub and roots and reggae music, is very much about, it's an education, whether that's about, you know, Black history, whether it's about, you know, meditating, love, etc. It's usually quite a peaceful message. And then what I felt, for me to then override that and make the music and the environment about me was not what my intention was. And so I never clash sounds, never ever, because I feel like it's quite egotistical, and it makes it about me, and it's never been about me. It's really about bringing people together, elevating them, and creating a safe space for them to enjoy music, which I think, you know, it doesn't have a type, it doesn't have a color, it's just all embracive. So yeah.
I love it. Great. I love the whole philosophy. I'm in 100%. I have a question. I have some questions in the chat here. I think somebody wants to join CAYA, but the question is how to not be overwhelmed by all the technical aspects when it comes to creating sound systems, and just if there's any resources that they could possibly learn from that you might know of. Perhaps they could be your intern.
Okay, so that's really interesting, because I think what I've learned about myself in the past few years is that is it kinetic learner? So I generally learn by doing. And fortunately, because I wouldn't say I learned from my dad because I was very young, but once I kind of begun developing the sound and kind of deciding upon what I wanted to do, I kind of just made it a process of what had to go where and how it would all work, obviously without blowing up the system. Resources, I must say, that's something that I think would be really good in terms of building sound systems, but there isn't. And so it has been very much through try and test and learning from other sound system builders and, you know, founders, etc. But just really then trying to navigate my own way. But I think, what would I say, how to potentially start and where to start? I think it would be to watch some really old films. You know, if you're talking about a traditional sound, films like Babylon, I'm not sure if you've seen that, but that's the kind of most renowned sound system culture film. It's called Babylon. And actually, the Jashaka, who is like the founder of UK British sound system culture, features in it. And then of late, there's actually a BBC series called Small Act, which is based on that whole migration from the Caribbean. So I would say start with some really old videos and, you know, as much as I can, I can try and help.
Babylon, yes. I haven't seen the BBC one though. I want to see that. I'm excited.
It's being released, I think, this week. So yeah, it's.
Oh, okay. I'm writing this down for myself.
Yes.
Selfishly. Small acts.
Yeah.
I love it. Another question. We don't want to get too depressing here, but how are you dealing, obviously, with the current, you know, environment and lack of live events? Like, what's your response to that?
I think for me, it's been twofold because as I mentioned and as you mentioned, I'm kind of developing things away from CAYA, you know, but also in sync with the sound and the whole enterprise. But I don't just play the sound system, but it has been difficult because what you find is that, you know, so I have a sound system, but I also have African pieces of equipment. So I have a controller, you know, and I can DJ, but my heart is sound system. So I often, you know, have this kind of ongoing battle because I love my sound and I feel that there are some things that you just can't do via Zoom and, you know, virtually. They have to be in person. So, you know, obviously the culture now, or the trend now, is very much online and lives and DJing. That's challenging. But I think in terms of actual work, because I don't just play the sound, I do workshops in schools, CAYA's used also for like art exhibitions. I can't do that now, but there's other things that I'm doing, which I've been able to do as a result of not being able to take the sound out. So yeah, I've been busy working on the tech side of things, writing a book, and so yeah, there's that. But it's difficult. Overall, it's difficult. Sound systems are to be played loud and to be played in, you know, out in the open. So it's been difficult. But I think as time goes on, we're seeing less and less venues and environments to be able to play sound systems. So it's you know, I wouldn't say it's, I suppose it's kind of adjusting to what potentially might be become the new norm. But I then think for me, it's about finding places. I'll never stop playing CAYA. You know, I'm here in the UK, but I'm also doing work in Africa. So I think, you know, in places like that where you have a lot more outdoor space and a lot more, I suppose that culture, I'll always play CAYA, but it has been difficult here in the UK. Yes.
I can imagine yeah, it's heartbreaking, really. If let's pretend COVID's not happening, and we're kind of, I don't want to say it that way, but let's just say, what would be the dream gigs for CAYA in the future? Let's just pretend COVID's not happening.
Ooh, dream gigs. So I was actually meant to be in Brazil this year. So there is a network called the Soundsystem International, and I suppose I was very much part of its. I've been part of it since its inception. It brings together academics and practitioners across, people from the diaspora, as well as the kind of key continents or the key places that sound system culture exists. And so it's been here in the UK, in Jamaica, and this year it was to be hosted in Brazil. But because of COVID, that couldn't happen. I wasn't going to bring the whole sound, but there were sound systems there for me to play on. And I think that would have been one of the most, I think of my of CAYA's journey so far, I think that would have been a great highlight. So yeah, I think Brazil, that I think would be amazing. When I played last year in Naples, it was like in an old ruined building. It used to be I don't think it was an asylum. It was a detention center, and but it was still used as like a venue, and that was incredible. That was a really, really great event, and it was really well attended. So that was great. But I think going forward, Brazil and also Africa, I'd like to be able to play at a festival, street festival, or almost like a radical activist event. I often have these epiphanies of CAYA being front stage at some kind of movement and playing this, groundbreaking tune that changes the world or something. So wherever that is, I don't know, but that's what I often dream of.
Well, now that you said it, it will happen. That's how it works.
Could be in San Francisco.
Yes, come here. I would love that. I'm sure you would have a lot of fans here. I guess my question that came up from that is, when you're doing these performances other places, you kind of alluded to it, but how do you take the CAYA with you? How do you take the system physically with you, or do you just take parts? Or
Oh, no. So whenever I play a sound, I take the whole sound system.
Wow.
Yeah. So the whole sound system goes with me, and I've literally moved this into my kitchen. I'm in my dining room kitchen today, and it's no easy task. Sound system is amazing, but there's a whole backstory that is like, it's a real journey, because when I'm moving the system, usually there's at least 2, if not 3 of us. And when I'm moving the sound, even though I can move, these are all on wheels, and back in the day, I don't know how, but they moved the speakers without wheels on, and they weigh a lot. But usually when I'm moving the sound, I have a strap on, I have my steel cap toe boots on that I had to put on today to move this into here. And it's really, it's a whole, it's a whole movement. So I used to have a van, my own van, that I used to drive around, and but I recently got rid of it just because I haven't been out with the sound, it was costing me more, etc. So it works out cheaper for me to just rent a van whenever I need to take the sound out. But it's a full operation. Usually once the sound, I'd say to set up, it takes about an hour and a half, 2, but no, I'd say maximum an hour and a half. But prior to that, I usually take the sound out every quarter if I haven't been playing it regularly, just to make sure that all the speakers are in check, and there's somewhere locally that I hire just to make sure that all the equipment, basically a sound check, So yeah, it's a big operation. In terms of, you know, in comparison, I have a controller that I use when I'm DJing, and I literally lift it up and take it with me. And then when it comes to the sound, you know, you're waiting on people to kind of help you lift a speaker into a van. So yeah, it's a major operation.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have to ask. So Brazil, you can't do the van. So
No,
like,
no, no,
do you
no.
ship it or do you
No.
use parts there?
Okay, so what would have happened when I was to attend the event in Brazil, because it's each country takes in turn to host the event, they would have a sound system that I would play on. So CAYA wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't be shipping CAYA out. She's gone as far as Spain, but that's as far as she's gone. She hasn't gone any further than that, not international as yet.
Yeah, I was like, how does that happen? Thank you.
Mhm.
I was curious. So, question in the chat. Can you talk a little bit about power considerations and requirements?
Power, in order to power the speakers or
I'm gonna,
the
I,
amplifiers.
I'm gonna guess they're talking. Well, they could be talking about the amplifier, but also electrical. Oh, generators, like
Oh,
electrical. So where does the electricity come from? Like, what do you have to worry about generators or a backup or how? What do you tell people that you require when Kaya's? Uh,
well, whenever I play or and have played, most venues, you know, I haven't, where generators are required, then they provide them, and I kind of pitch up with what I have, and it kind of goes in sync. In terms of, yeah, and in terms of venues, it's never been an issue in terms of generators. I think obviously playing in places like Africa and Brazil, potentially, it's something that I would have to consider, but to date, I haven't had to consider the power configurations, etc. I don't know if that answers the question.
yeah, I think they're probably asking from the perspective of like, do you have to tell them, give them specific electrical requirements, so that that you have what you need when you get there?
Well, I generally bring everything that I'm going to be using with me, and I tell them how much it's going to be pulling, etc. But I don't bring a generator with me. No, I don't.
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah, and it's just like here when you do festivals, you have to say, I need, this much power. But
Ah, okay.
I think that's where it's a good question because you could show up and, you know,
Yeah,
and like, okay, it can't handle this.
yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah.
probably
No,
couldn't,
absolutely.
I don't think it could handle Kaya. I don't know. We'd have to, we'd have
I'm
to
so.
find something else to make sure that Kaya could not blow up the power grid in the area, which would be
Yes.
interesting. I think we have time for like one more question. Oh yeah, somebody asked, did Tali say her power amps were class C? That's yes.
Class D.
Yeah.
D for Delta.
Oh, I thought you said C. D for
No.
Delta.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said C as well. So it's class D.
Yeah.
So they're saying what led to that decision, especially since that's not common in audio. And I think we kind of touched on it, but let's go there again because it came up.
So why did I decide on those amplifiers?
Yes.
Oh, so it was really, I think, as I said, there's parts of the sound that I wanted to keep very, very traditional, but then there were parts of the sound that I had to be practical about and had to consider, transportation as well as my budget. And to be able to transport analog amplifiers, like the real hardcore amplifier that my father used, and some traditional sound systems like Shaka still use, they are very, very heavy, and they're powerful. But I think for what I'm doing with CAYA, it wasn't just about the main focus for me for sound was, as I said, spiritual liberation. It wasn't about this kind of pounding, sound and, deep bass, which is really cool for some sounds, and that's what people are attracted to. But for CAYA, it wasn't about that kind of dominant bass line that needed that real grunt of an analog amplifier. It was about, what I could afford, what I could transport, and where I could get, a quality sound. And I felt that I could get that from the iNukes that I use. And they're practical and they've served me good so far. I know in the sound system world, they're kind of frowned upon. Well, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but they're not kind of, they're being used more and more. I think when I got them, they were quite new to the market. And so they were, lots of people, as always, they were quite skeptical. And because they were affordable and they weren't kind of like these thousands of pound amplifiers, which were, the rave of all of the bigger sounds, they were kind of like, but they served me well. So yeah, it was really a cost decision, a practical decision, and a sound decision. And I felt like, if I can get a 3.5, 4 star across all of those, then I'm happy.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It's also, there's been so many developments in amplifiers where people had in the past have shunned, and then it's like they're not even trying kind of some of the new technology that's made them really. I mean, you get that same thing with like, oh, I only use tube amps, and it's like, okay. And then sometimes they are using things they don't even know are not tubes. So yes. I was like, there's no tubes in there. It's vintage, but there's no tubes in there. So you just proved yourself wrong. Yeah. Exactly. So I love that you're experimenting, and kind of keeping the tradition going, but at the same time, like trying new things and technology and creating a whole new thing. I think that's totally fantastic. So we have 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions that I missed in the chat? Because I have one more, but I just want to give everybody a chance. So if you have any one question that you want to pop in the chat, I'm happy to ask it, or I'm going to ask another one. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Well, I'm going to ask you this anyway. So just what are your goals for this coming year? Just wow. You have so many, but like, what's your imminent, like, I'm working on this right now? What's exciting?
Okay, so the microphones, that's what I'm working on. I finished my children's book, which is all about the culture and et cetera, so that's done. But yeah, more imminently, it's the audio, and it's really trying to create CAYA as a bigger entity, globally, because it has a presence here in the UK, but, I'm trying to, push things and grow things, organically a lot further. So really trying to just highlight the importance of sound system, highlight the importance of women, highlight the importance of audio, what the world would look like without that. And also trying to, I think, coming from the sound system background we spoke about it before, it was to really educate people about, how sound and audio are one and the same, but just again from different perspectives, because I think it kind of separates us. Where I think we could do a lot more together. So really trying to empower, people, women in particular, about that.
I love this children's book. I want to see the sound system children's book. I'm like dying to see that. So how can we follow CAYA, and how can we find out more about CAYA? Like, I want to make sure I know when the children's book comes out for sure.
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram as audio.by Thali Lotus. I'm also, my website is www.kayasounds.co.uk. I'm also on Facebook as CAYA, and I'll be sending as much or put in as much. I also have CAYA audio. I always forget that. So there's a personal page for me, Tali, but then there's also the CAYA audio page, which has only been about in the last 3 weeks because, you know, as I'm nearing the launch of the products, that page has started going up. And yeah, please follow at CAYA audio. That's all one word. And also follow at audio.by Lotus. My website is www.cayasounds.co.uk, and my Facebook page is CAYA, CAYA, like this.
Yes, we're putting it all in the chat for you too, so that's awesome. So that people can connect to you and follow what your next adventures are. But I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing all that, your expertise and everything about what you do, because it's super interesting, and I want to just see that everywhere because it's so cool. So I appreciate you.